Welcome to Getcha Rocks Off with Mick Wall, the world's leading rock and metal writer. Each fortnight, Mick will unpack rock and roll stories. Stories that you probably won't find in print. So pour yourself a Jack and Coke and get ready to Getcha Rocks Off.
Hello, my name is Mick Wall. Welcome to Getcha Rocks Off. Getcha Rocks Off. You have to say it like that, you really do. Getcha Rocks Off, new podcast by me. If you don't know who I am, I don't know, Google. I just can't be bothered to do the big I am. I'm here with my friend today, Jon Hotten.
Hello, Mick.
Who really is a fantastically professional podcaster and humanitarian. Jon and I first met in the 1980s.
1987 it would have been, when I turned up at Kerrang! Magazine on work experience.
Yeah.
And the big shot, number one gun, was Mr. Mick Wall, if you ever got to see him in the office, because he was always in LA.
Yeah, that's not entirely true. Well, the big gun, obviously, that's true.
The big gun is true. He was the man.
Yeah, absolutely. Still am. Many would say if they want to stay my friend. But anyway, so Jon is definitely going to be helping me out with these podcasts because not only is Jon was absolutely one of the other really great writers on the magazine. He's gone on to have a much better career than me. We're not going to talk about that.
We won't talk about our successes here.
No, especially not your success. Enormous success. As a writer and cricket star, basically. Detective, part-time lover, the whole thing.
All those things.
All those things.
Come to me.
Yeah. So if you do have ideas for the sort of things you'd like to hear us talking about, if you really must, then do let me know, and possibly we'll get round to them. Isn't that right, Jon?
We will, but what we're going to concentrate on today is, I believe, the glory days. The days we think of when we close our eyes and think of the words Kerrang!, heavy metal, hair metal, LA. That's where we're at. That's where our minds are at today. That's where our bodies would be at today had we the money to be there.
That's right. We're going straight to the Sunset Strip.
We are.
We're on the Strip.
The Strip. We've landed on the red eye.
We are on Planet Rock, 1983. Or 80, whatever.
It's a bit early, really.
Oh, was it?
Well, I reckon.
Well, okay, let's get into this. When did LA rock begin? I mean, some would say Van Halen.
Yeah, Van Halen, I suppose, were kicking around about that point. Van Halen and the Crew. The Crew had formed in, 1980, 81? No.
First album was 81.
81, so yeah, about 80, yeah. So it was kicking off. Starting to kick off then.
Who were then, because also let's not forget there was Quiet Riot.
Yes.
Who I think we should also give a special mention to, because their legendary drummer, Franki Banali, he sadly died.
Just passed away, yeah.
Just earlier, a few weeks ago. I know we're kind of going off message here, but I actually I saw Franki in LA back in February.
Did you?
He was at this special Dio memorial event.
Right.
And as I'm sure a lot of you know, Franki was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer a year and a half ago. He's only given 6 months to live, but he clearly went further than that. And I interviewed him in June, just over the phone, because lockdown, I can't get to LA. And he was still in amazing form, an incredibly intelligent, interesting guy. Did you know he did artwork?
Yeah. I saw a wonderful, I don't know if you can get it on Netflix or somewhere like that, at the time of the Anvil documentary, which everyone remembers, which was terrific.
The legendary...
which kickstarted every band then wanted a kind of Anvil, the story of Anvil, their own thing. Saxon did a very funny one, which I saw, and there were lots of others. I believe, and I did see parts of it, Franki Banali did one about Quiet Riot and his friendship with Kevin Dubrow, which was a lifelong thing, and obviously ended when Kevin died, and that was incredibly touching, especially the final scenes where Franki was at Kevin's grave. And so, I just think, it's a reminder. We're going to go off into the madness and the fun and the the great bits about being young, but in the end everyone gets old and these things start to happen. And that was an incredibly touching film. I was very sorry to hear about Franki, actually. He was a good guy.
He was a good guy, very talented as well, and he became kind of the keeper of the Quiet Riot.
He very much so, yeah. And that needed keeping, because as you say, Mick, and we're talking about those early days of LA and hair metal and where it came from, Quiet Riot often get overlooked in that discussion because it's always about Van Halen and the crew, because they were the guys, great looking and all of that. Not the Quiet Riot, but they had mental health was massive, wasn't it?
It was the first ever, I think, heavy metal album to go to number one.
Yeah, number one on Billboard, which I think kind of turned a light bulb on and made everyone think, hang on, here's a genre of music that is not represented particularly anywhere. I mean, this is the start of MTV, probably just about the start of MTV.
About the same time.
I think
MTV is, 82?
Yeah. So it's just all starting to coalesce. It's all starting to come together. And I think that kind of opened people's eyes and said, hang on, if Quiet Riot can have a number one album, certainly light bulbs are going on in Sharon Osbourne's mind, and Ozzy came along. Ozzy based himself in LA. First thing he did, was he not woken from his drunken and drugged stupor by Sharon in a hotel in LA somewhere when she rescued him? I mean that.
She did. That all happened in Los Angeles, and of course the Quiet Riot connection here is that Ozzy's. The thing that helped transform Ozzy from a broken down Black Sabbath reject into a massive heavy metal star in America in the 80s was Randy Rhodes.
Yes.
Who had been in Quiet Riot.
Yeah.
And along, I think, with Eddie Van Halen, arguably even more so, was the guy that kind of set the
widdly
template.
the widdly guitar, which was the essential component, wasn't it? I mean,
shredding.
Shredding, as they call it. Everyone used to call it something different, didn't they? Before it became known as shredding. But that was the thing. When you suddenly heard or whatever it was.
How did it go?
It was and then the singer could come in on top of it, and it was amazing.
Unless he was Ozzy.
Then
it's more like Sharon.
Yeah, it was fucking great. But no, Randy, you're absolutely right about that. But I've got a question for you, Mick, before we kick in a bit to that. And it's about LA itself, the place. If you believe in any kind of psychogeography or the force of place, the influence of place, what is it about LA that meant that became the city in the same way that Seattle will later come to represent grunge music, or New York represents disco and glam? And what was it about LA, do you think, that was particularly responsible for what we're going to talk about?
I think geography is exactly what we're talking about. Los Angeles had always been the hedonistic capital of America. New York had always traditionally been the head of the center of the music business in America. But Los Angeles, by the 80s, has had this period in the 70s, this decadent period of Led Zeppelin at the Rainbow in West Hollywood, Fleetwood Mac, the Eagles, that whole kind of dark desert highway hedonism. But you were talking kind of Learjets. I mean, wasn't it Don Henley of the Eagles who coined the phrase "love 'em and leer 'em"?
Yeah.
Because if the groupies weren't...
that's what you did, man.
Because that's what you did, man. If they were in, Arizona, and the chicks backstage that night weren't
good enough,
they would get a Learjet to fly chicks from LA to the show.
Well, who doesn't do that?
And then they'd love them and leer the Learjet back.
Yeah.
I mean, who didn't do that in the 70s?
Everyone's a winner.
Absolutely. Best of my love, So you got this whole kind of Hotel California ethos, along with the movie industry, which is the sleaziest business of all, or was until the 80s and metal took over. So you've got this idea of LA being dreams, hedonism.
Yeah.
But also, I think in the 80s, what made it so acute for metal was that in the rest of the world, post-punk, and I include America in this, because it wasn't like this in New York. Everywhere else, post-punk, metal was the uncoolest music there had ever been. You know, I mean, when Motley Crue came along, their biggest criticism for most of the most successful part of their career was, but they can't play.
Yeah.
but their songs aren't any good.
Yeah.
And in LA, people, and I was there for a lot of this, we were going, gives a fuck, man. It's really fun.
Yeah.
Have you seen the chicks?
Yeah.
Have you had all those drugs?
Yeah.
And are we going to ride that motorcycle into the pool, or are we just going to sit here all night reading the latest lyrics from Morrissey?
Yeah.
I mean, you know...
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, when you do probably a final word on LA, the place, if people who haven't been or weren't there at the time, is that LA is a huge city, a huge sprawling city that is kind of divided by the hills in which you see the big sign and everything. But this, the times and the bands we're talking about, centred on a very small part of that, which was West Hollywood, which is now, ironically, I think, the great kind of LBGT centre of LA, you know. So it's changed completely. But back in the day, within a few hundred yards, you had the Sunset Marquee, the Hyatt on Sunset, you had the Rainbow, you had the
Roxy,
Cat House, the Roxy,
Whiskey A Go Go.
Yeah, and then Barney's Beanery, and, you know, the Cat and Fiddle, and all those places everyone used to go and hang out in. It was a bit like the middle of London, where you could just walk around. If you remember that, there was the Marquee and the, you know, whatever, the Ship and the San Moritz and all of those. Within a few hundred yards, well, maybe slightly more than that, but this scene was centred on a few streets in West Hollywood. That's where it was. Motley Crue's apartment was just round the corner from the
North Clark
Street. That's right.
Down the road from the Rock and Roll Ralph.
Yeah, the Rock and Roll, which is amazing. If you went there in the 1980s from England, the idea that a supermarket would be open 24 hours blew your tiny mind, baby. And you go in there and they used to sell big bags of crisps. It was like, man, have you seen these crisps? They're not like a little Golden Wonder size. They're the size of your head, you know. And this was like, welcome to LA, welcome to America. That was the difference in the lifestyle. And the reason it was called Rock and Roll Ralph's, of course, was that you'd see trailing round there, you know, Tame Me Down or Steven Adler or some guy sent out by his chick. You know, I'm hungry, go and get me. You know, that would, Rock and Roll Ralph's, that's where they went, yeah.
And that idea of instead of less is more, this was more is more.
More is very much more.
More is more.
Yeah.
You can't go too large with this. And that was implicit in the place, because not only was it 24 hours, but the weather was always so great. I remember one time, before Guns N' Roses became monumentally famous, I mean, even after they did, actually, but this was just before. And I was around someone's place in West Hollywood, and Slash was there, Izzy was there, Duff was there, and people from, you know, Cinderella or Rat, or just anybody that had been down the Rainbow that night. We ended up at this place. Rainbow, the famous club in West Hollywood where Led Zeppelin first popularised it. But by the 80s, we're talking Crue, Ozzy, Guns, Poison, you name it.
You have to imagine this place if you've never seen it. It's like the sort of inside of a tart boudoir, wasn't it? It was
all red.
Dark, all red, dark, with sort of shell-shaped seats. So all everywhere you could sit was sort of semicircles,
half
with
moons.
with a table in front of you. So
underneath that table, quite often a waitress.
Yeah. So I mean, it was sort of decadent in the worst possible way,
and it still is.
It's still like that, apparently. Yeah.
In fact, we're going to do a podcast episode specifically about the Rainbow at some point, because that also has a big anniversary coming up next year.
Does it? Okay,
we will get there. But this particular night, so there's always reprobates back at this pad. Might even have been my pad, actually. I think it was, in fact. And around the corner was a Safeway supermarket. And of course, again, we weren't used to this back in the old country in those days. It was 24/7, and of course, it was built like an airport, enormous, you know.
Yeah.
And we were having gin fizzes. Don't ask me why, but 4 a.m, gin fizz, dude, you know. And
what is a gin fizz?
Gin,
yeah,
and I think lemon.
So it's basically just gin.
And lemon?
Yeah.
No, this is important because this is the story, right?
Right.
Truthfully, I can't remember. I think someone was making it in the bath or something. But so suddenly it's like, we're out of lemons, dude. No, dude. Tragedy. Lemons. Yeah. So Izzy Stradlin goes, not a problem, dude. I'll just go and get some. So Izzy takes off. He's not driving.
Is he always the sensible one?
Is he the sensible one? He takes off, but he doesn't drive because obviously, you know, even Izzy's not crazy enough to drive when he's been up for 5 days doing all kinds of gin fizzes. Yeah. Off he goes. He goes round to the Safeway and we're thinking, wow, what a hero, you know. He's gone ages. I mean, ages. And finally, he comes out. We can hear him coming up the street because there's like a rattle. There's this rattling. And it's Izzy coming back with a huge shopping cart filled to the brim with lemons. And he's like, dude, I got the lemons. Yeah. By which time what are they for, man? Yeah. The gin fizz. Oh, no, we're over that. We're on to something else now, you know. Yeah. I must tell you another quick story about Izzy. Might have been the same night. I can't remember. I think all these nights blur into one. But there was another occasion, very similar. And Izzy was searching in his pockets for something to light a cigarette. And a bit of paper fell out of his pocket. And I'm like, Izzy, you dropped, you know. So he picks it up. It's all scrunched up. And he kind of opens it out and he goes, oh, man, yeah, it's a check. I went, all right. I'm like, what, a royalty check? Yeah. You know, ha, ha, ha. He went, yeah. And I was like, give us a look. It was for $900,000. Not exactly, it's like 900
and something. And change.
And change, dude.
900 and change.
And I'm looking at this going, fuck, you know. I said, you don't want to lose this, do you? He goes, oh, yeah, no. So how long have you had this? He said, it's been in my pocket for a couple of weeks. I said, we better put it in the bank. He goes, I ain't got a bank account.
Yeah.
I was like, well, if you give it to me, I will take care of it.
This is the thing. I'm not injecting this on a kind of downer note at all. But I think it's worth saying is that you've got to remember everyone was really young then, you know, and a lot of these kids, you kind of realise now, you look back, and I know a lot of them started with Motley Crue when they did The Dirt, which was kind of a bit of fun, but, you know, started to touch on a few truths of people's lives. And then you had Axl, you know, whose anger is a lot easier to understand when you start to hear about his childhood.
Absolutely,
and you hear about Nikki Sixx's childhood, and and you think now in the world we live in now in 2020 we would understand those people far better. Back then you had this kind of incredibly hedonistic city, incredibly hedonistic time. People were very young, and the way they were not just escaping life to live a rock and roll lifestyle to have great fun, which it was, but there was this pain that was behind it in a lot of cases. And I think, you know, as I've got older, I've come to recognise that and think, I wish I'd thought about that more at the time in dealing with some of those people who you just, oh, he's a dick, you know. He won't do this. He won't do this interview. He won't, you know, he's unconscious on heroin or for 6 days or whatever.
How annoying is that?
How annoying is that? Don't you know I've got a deadline? Get that needle out of your arm, Nikki Sixx. But, you know, you come to understand, you know, why they were where they were and why some of that music had what it's had. You know, I mean, you can call Nikki Sixx what you like, but, you know, Kickstart My Heart and all of that. So that was real. That was absolutely real as it was happening. And if it had anything, rudimentary chords or whatever, my 5-year-old could play them, doesn't matter. What it had was truth at its heart. And I think that's what was connecting with people a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think Guns N' Roses in particular, coming when they did, rather than at the beginning of that wave, as it were, they came towards the end. and suddenly there was a little more space for them to move into, and people were ready to hear songs that were clearly more than just girls, girls, girls.
I think you're right.
Side.
Yeah. But it's interesting that a lot. I know LA, and if you were there at the time, a typical night out on the Strip in West Hollywood, you wouldn't be able to move. There were people standing in the street, and everyone was in a band, everyone was handing out flyers, because this is back in the day. There's no email, there's no internet. You couldn't text someone about your band. If you had a gig, the only way you could tell someone was to print a flyer, cheap, and stand in the street and put it in someone's hand and hope they took notice. So it kind of created this. You'd see the same guys out there. There was that band London, wasn't there? That sort of famous.
Well, they were kind of
LA.
like the nest from which came Wasp, Motley Crue.
Blackie was in it, Nicky was in it.
Other people.
Nadia de Priest was in it.
Let us not forget Nadia de Priest.
A great character, who you would see around doing flyers or whatever the fuck he was doing, And so you'd have this kind of pulsing scene of people, and in amongst that are people you've never heard of who knows what happened to them. Did they go away? Randy from Odin, what happened to him?
From Odin,
Randy.
You see,
Randy.
This is another aspect I don't think people pay enough attention to, which is names.
Yeah,
names.
Where did you get your name from? Because you had to think up a name when you got there. Because it's about reinvention. It's about being someone new.
So let's go through this. Nicky Six.
Yeah.
2 Ks, 2 X's.
Yeah.
Do you even know the origins of that?
I don't.
Me either. Okay. Nadia de Priest. I love that one.
You had to get a little
you had to
apostrophe in your surname.
Either an apostrophe or an umlaut.
Yeah.
So Nadia de Priest.
Essentials.
Brett Michaels.
Yeah. Simple but classic.
I mean, he could have been a porn star, couldn't he?
Yeah.
Brett Michaels is in She Does It Twice, or what it is. The postman always knocks 5 times.
Brett Michaels always bangs twice.
CC DeVille.
CC DeVille. That's fantastic, isn't it?
The obvious one. I mean, Mick Mars.
Yeah.
Come on.
Mick was. He's a kind of constant fascination of mine, because that dude was old in 1987.
I think he actually died in about 84, but is still walking the earth.
Reincarnated, in some way, Amazing. Robert Deal is his name. See, this is the other thing. Now, when we were writing on Kerrang, there was a big sort of hoo-ha at one point about Motley Crue that we might come on to in another episode.
Right.
This hoo-ha involved who had actually been in the band at what point and so on and so forth.
You're alluding to... We will get on to another episode. You're alluding to the moment when Nicky Six
was exposed as being a doppelganger in the pages of Kerrang. Is this true? Is this not true? Who knows? But anyway, we do know it wasn't true. But anyway, it's a long story.
It was nearly true. There was a lot of overlap between reality and fantasy.
This is what we'll come on to, but this will be another episode. But what it did involve was we were suddenly revealed the real names of people who were in Motley Crue, and we printed them in the magazine, and we didn't know them. There was no internet. You couldn't just look some guy up and find out who he was, as you can now. There was mystery. There was, hang on, Nicky's real name's Frank Farana.
I remember being shocked.
Man, you mean Nicky Six isn't his name?
Frank Farana?
Who's Frank Farana? And Bob Deal was... you understand,
Deal.
Bobby Deal. You understand
Good
why he
deal.
became. You understand.
Drug deal, and on guitar, drug deal.
Why did he ever change that? What an idiot!
What's the deal,
What an idiot,
Bob?
Mick Mars is. So we found out they were on it. It was like, this is crazy, So there was a kind of the whole thing was this kind of fantastic illusion where you could go and become someone new. And Mick Mars was a great case in point, because he'd been knocking around since about 72 or something like that with the name Motley Crue. And there was always a great story at the time. The reason Mick's in the band, he owns the name, man. That's why Mick's in the band, because he looked like this kind of coffin dodger.
Why was he in the band? Wasn't it because he was the only one with a van or something like that?
I don't know. All these origin stories, you don't really know. The story was that he had the name Motley Crue. I think he'd definitely been in a band called Motley Crue, and it was spelled the conventional way at that point.
Right.
But then I think Nicky came along, and really what's worth saying about Nicky as well, as having knocked his songwriting earlier, is his kind of aesthetic sense was what made the band. He was
Completely.
a really clever guy.
And his vision.
Yeah, it was his vision. And that's when I say the aesthetics of the band, not just the song titles and the album titles, but the way they dressed, the way the album covers looked, the way the logo looked, the way the band name was spelled, the way the fact they had the couple of umlauts. All of that stuff came from Nicky. And, you know, when they did Theatre of Pain, you know, all the devil stuff and, you know, so all of that came from Nicky, and that was his true genius, I think, not necessarily as a musician and songwriter, but as a kind of visionary of what this scene could become.
Absolutely. And when you saw them on stage in those days, he, to me, you couldn't take your eyes off him. I remember the first time I saw them live in some little place, and at one point he just stood there at the front of the stage, not even touching the guitar, just preening. And he was magnetic. He just looked otherworldly.
Yeah.
And I think
it's amazing to think they were living those lifestyles, because these guys were, Nicky and Tommy, I would say, were what I would call genetic celebrities, in that their genes were just sensational. You could see them. I remember them turning up in London once, and this was shortly after the Matthew Tripp thing, when Nicky Six hated me, right? And Jeff Barton, who's the editor of Kerrang, said, "Oh, do you want to go and interview Motley Crue?" So I was like, all right, okay. Because they're going over to Ray Palmer's studio. Ray was a photographer, and Ray had a studio in Ladbroke Grove, I think it was,
of course,
that he shared with Tony Mottram. And
which wasn't at all sleazy. Can we just say it wasn't at all sleazy?
There was nothing like that going on. And the crew went over there. And here's the great thing. They turned up in 4 separate limousines that each took up about 3 parking metres. And there were these poor bastards from the record company outside running up and down the parking metres, desperately shoving change into them while the Motley Crue staggered out. And they'd just come back from Japan or something like that. You know, it was like these guys were on a record company treadmill by this point. I think Dr. Feelgood had either just come out or was just about to come out.
That was their that was their first number one.
They were just going to become more than just a sort of an LA, but they were going to become global superstars at this point. And they come trooping it. They're all bored, you know. Vince is bored and Tommy's bored. But you looked at these guys, and Ray's studio was just this kind of, you know, typical photographer studio. So it's an empty sort of a warehousey type space. But what it had was, it had this sort of set of stairs at the back, and it had a kind of mezzanine, only small, with a little kind of wooden barrier around it. But up there were a couple of sofas, and you could just sit up there and watch what was going on. And so we decided we'd do the interview in twos. So we'd do like 2 would have their photographs done while I interviewed 2 of them. And then they'd swap around, you know. And Nicky and Tommy came up. No, Nicky might have done it with Vince, I think, and then Mick did it with Tommy. And the cleared, like, Vince and Mick looked wrecked. You know, they'd just been to Japan. They fucking... Vince was moaning about that Russia festival. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah, I was there. The Moscow Music Peace Festival. He goes,
do you know how far Moscow is, man? It's fucking far. He was so funny. He was really funny about it, because there was a big, I mean, I'm sure you'll tell us, there's a big argument over who was going to be top of the bill, wasn't there?
It ended up with their manager, Doc McGee, being fired.
Yeah. Oh, is that what Doc was fired? Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
sorry about that,
Doc and I have been doing some work recently on Doc's memoir. I cannot reveal too much. Possibly,
but you can reveal
episode.
He was fired by Motley Crue.
But he also was the guy that discovered Motley Crue.
Yeah.
And he told me, he said, in the early days of Crue, Tommy and Mick would share a room. He said, and after a while, he said, we debated whether to take one of the beds out, because Mick was never allowed in his bed because Tommy would always force him to sleep in the closet. Because Mick's thing was booze. Yeah. So Mick was always drunk. Tommy was always the opposite. He was always high as a kite and crazy and smashing the place up. So a couple of times Mick took to hiding in the closet before Tommy, because Mick would be boozed up and go to bed, and then Tommy would come in 4 hours later, smash the joint up, bring women and other guys in. So Mick took to hiding in the closet. So then Tommy insisted, right, okay, dude, well, that's where you sleep from now on. And they did a whole European tour where Mick had to sleep in the closet.
This is the reason why Mick looks like absolute crap when he turns on the radio. And then, Vince does, because he's probably shagged 57
women on
the way over.
Just on the way over.
Yeah, just so he's bored. But Nicky and Tommy, I mean, they look like gods, and it transpires at this point they're both on heroin, but they looked like, I mean, they were big, and Nicky was muscly, he was a big, and at one point he turns around to me and he goes, "You wrote a shitty thing about me, man." And I honestly thought he was going to hit me at that point. He was like very, very wound up.
I'd have hit you.
So he should have hit me. He was, and I just thought, Jesus, if he hits me, he's a big, strong guy, but amazing looking bloke. And
they were hitters. I mean, they used to hit each other.
Yeah, and very much the boss. Nicky deferred to by everyone else. I'm sure that kind of changed over the years as it went. I saw Vince recently in Las Vegas.
It had to be. You saw Vince in Las Vegas,
which is where he lives. Is where he lives.
Is he doing the Fat Elvis show?
Yeah, he pretty much is. He's still in the leathers, but they're size XXL these days.
That's because he's a real man.
Yeah. But Chris, actually, I don't know if I can tell that story.
Well, let me. Go on.
No.
All right, well, let me tell a story then about Motley Crue. And I was saying they were hitters.
Yeah.
They loved to fight.
Yeah.
In 1984, so what's that? Theatre of Pain?
Second album, yeah.
They were the opening act at Castle Donington that year in England. The Monsters of Rock Festival.
Marillion were second on the bill.
They were.
What a bill. Who thought that one? Morris Jones, on down.
No. Marillion was the following year.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
Or maybe even the following year. No, I think it was 85, because that was ZZ Top.
Probably, no, it was ZZ Top, you're right.
84 was Van Halen.
My bad, as they say.
AC/DC, blah-de-blah.
The good year.
So they did the European Monsters of Rock Festival circuit. Motley's first time out of America doing stuff. And at that time, they had this thing of, they would bite. They were biting people. Everybody they met, they would bite.
Jesus.
Doc told me one time Tommy bit him on the shoulder, and Doc is a tough dude. He's not tall like Tommy, but I mean, Doc had been in the army, and I don't know if you know this, Doc had been a wrestler at college.
I did not know.
Yeah, no, Olympic
level
wrestler.
Like proper college wrestling, not the
absolutely.
The
you don't mess with Doc.
No way, no, that's proper.
So Doc,
MMA these days he'd be into.
So as Tommy's biting him on the shoulder, Doc's like, "You fucker!" Grabs him by the head, throws him over on the ground. Yeah. Bang, bang, bang.
That's proper management.
That's proper management. Yeah. You take the drummer who's biting you in the neck and drawing blood, you hurl him over your shoulder, and then beat the fuck out of him. So that's what you call creative management. So they're in this phase of biting, and one of the early Monsters of Rock Festival shows is in France, or something like that. And Tommy bites. He bit Eddie Van Halen. Okay.
Of course he did.
They're all
on the hand.
And these are like
on the hand, just before
like
the show.
Headliners or co-headliners, And Motley are the unknown opening band. Well, not unknown, but, in Europe. And so he bites Eddie Van Halen, he loses his shit, Well, and so suddenly David Lee Roth stands on the table and he's doing all the karate. Come on,
he's kicking the air.
Martial arts. He's flying through the air. And Tommy Lee stands up and goes, "I'm going to fuck you up, dude." And just gets hold of him and goes, smack, smack. Doc has to come running over and separate them.
Wow.
But I just love this image of David Lee Roth doing his, on a table, doing the thing, and Tommy just going, "Oh, yeah?" Gets him and shows him what it's about.
You see, that would be an interesting sidetrack of which guys were the fighters and which guys were the kind of... Because, there was the whole... It used to be a thing, didn't it? The bands would challenge each other to fights. Twisted Sister walked around Covent Garden looking for Krokus. Do you remember? They were looking for Krokus.
They're walking around Covent Garden in London.
Yeah. They
were Krokus in London at the time?
Who knows, man? There was a feud.
I don't know this one. Tell me this one.
It was in Kerrang. I was a reader at the time, so I only know this. But, I mean, sort of guys you don't mess with. Dee Snider would be pretty high on the list, as would their bass player, Mark Mendoza, I think his name was.
Yeah.
He was, I mean, these guys were...
Wasn't he called Mark the Animal Mendoza?
As a clue, and he used to have an enormous knife strapped to his leg, so which was a bit of a giveaway. And, you know, so you had guys who you genuinely wouldn't mess with, but in the press, everyone would be at each other, you know. And I suppose this reached its apogee, its high point, when Vince and Axl decided to have it away at the MTV Awards, was it?
Well, no, that was the catalyst.
That was the catalyst.
But then Axl...
Yeah. But what I was going to say is we're now going to the guys who can't really fight.
Well, this was the classic thing about the whole Axl versus Vince scenario, which keen-eared listeners will probably go, "Oh, he's going to tell the story of Get in the Ring," you know. That's for another time.
Yeah.
But in this interview that Axl did with me, where he calls out Vince.
That's right. Yeah. Now we're on to the good stuff. Yeah.
I think it was the VMAs, not MT. I think it was the VMAs.
A thing. It was a backstage thing, wasn't it? Where they were all together.
But do you know what the spark was? The spark was that Vince had married. What was her name? Cherise.
Oh, Cherise. Yeah, she was really a really nice person. Cherise.
She was.
She was also. She was a very nice person.
She was a mud wrestler at the Tropicana.
Tropicana. She was. Yeah.
So Vince had married this very nice.
We should talk about that non-sexist night out in a minute.
So Vince had married this very, very nice mud wrestler from the Tropicana called Cherise. Very nice lady. Good mud wrestler, I believe. And while Motley were on tour with Dr. Feelgood, Guns N' Roses were off tour now. They literally finished touring as Appetite went to number one. And then spent the next 2 years just doing sod all.
Well, no, surely you mean making Use Your Illusion.
Yeah, working hard, feverishly every day, creating a masterpiece. And so while Motley were on tour, Izzy allegedly ends up shagging Cherise. Right. Probably accidentally. You know, these things could happen in Hollywood in those days.
Yeah.
You wake up in the morning, oh my God, it's my dear friend Vince's wife. Yeah. Oh, she's got to leave now because she's got a mud wrestling match at the Tropicana later. So
I don't think she was mud wrestling once she was married to Vince.
Oh, really?
I'm just interjecting at that point.
Oh, she left behind the promising career as a mud wrestler.
Yeah, I think
in order to become a full-time housewife and caregiver.
We're going to talk about the Tropicana in a minute.
Okay, but let me finish the story. Let me finish the story.
It's a good one.
So, now I'm not saying Izzy did. I'm saying that was the story Vince
heard. That's the point of his name. That's how he got his name. Is he or not? Is he or not? We just don't know.
Is he, isn't he?
Yeah.
Did he, didn't he? I've lost... Oh, yeah. So, Vince comes back. Here's this story. Now, obviously, you'd be upset. And...
especially if you've been faithful like Vince was on the road.
Well, there you are, you see.
You've kept yourself pure through that entire 2-year tour.
You've kept your vows solemnly, as you do if you're Vince Neil in Motley Crue in the 80s.
Yeah.
He hears this, clearly upset, and at I think it was the VMAs, might have been MTV, all the same. At the award show, Izzy's there with Axl. And right at the end of the night, Vince gets hold of Izzy and gives him a couple of smacks.
Right.
At which point, according to Axl, Axl ran over to sort Vince out.
Yeah.
Now, Axl telling me about this. Apparently, his people held him back.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. And so, in the subsequent interview, Axl says to me, "Right, I'll call you out, Vince. I'll meet you anywhere, anytime." Guns or knives.
That's like Guns or Knives.
I'm going to quit.
Like that's going to happen. Do you mean Guns and Roses?
So Guns or Roses.
Yeah, roses or
any
knives.
Kind of flower arrangement you wish to bring to the fight. Now, of course, the fight never happened, even though Don King offered to promote. You told me that. The amazing Don King broke off from his latest Mike Tyson negotiation.
Yeah. To say, get in the ring.
Exactly. Well,
I'll provide the ring.
Yes.
And the money.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although our timelines are getting entangled here, but that's okay. So, but here's what I'm thinking at the time. Now, Axl, we'll get into this another time, but immensely talented guy. As you mentioned earlier, clearly a troubled childhood. This isn't a crazy rock star.
No,
this is a troubled individual.
He's a troubled man, yeah.
Definitely, but very creative, very artistic. But here's the thing, physically, I mean, small, tiny guy, arms like pipe cleaners.
Yeah.
This is not a guy down the gym.
No, he's not a fighter.
No. He definitely is not a fighter. Vince came from a tough street gang environment in the barrio, Mexican background. Yeah. Of all the people in Los Angeles you would wish to offer out to have a fight with, Vince is not even on the list. Yeah. He's the guy on the one to avoid list.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Because even if you were able to beat him, he'd still plunge a broken bottle in your neck at some point, you know. You did not mess with Vince. So Axl, not a real fighter. Vince, very much so.
Yeah. And we should, we did touch on the Tropicana at that point. I mean, I remember writing about Tropicana a few years ago and just thinking what an extraordinary idea it was. I mean, essentially, it was.
We should say it was a club.
Let's set the scene. It's a club and so there were various stop-offs on your night out in LA.
On your night out?
On my night out.
And that was number one.
No, it was about number 5, man. Because it was slightly off the beaten track, as I remember. You kind of had to get a cab there, probably.
A limo.
Yeah, or a limo.
Kind of had to get a limo.
Or a Learjet.
Yeah, or a Learjet.
Yeah, something like that. And it was in this kind of strange sort of grey building. It didn't look like it wasn't on the strip. It wasn't on the, it wasn't kind of have a big flashing light or anything like that. It was in this kind of grey. Yeah, if you drove past it during office hours, which obviously we all kept, you just think, what's that? What's that place? But during non-office hours, it became a nightclub, and the selling point of this nightclub was the mud wrestling. And the mud wrestling was conducted under certain rules.
Sorry, just to interject. Female mud wrestling.
This was what I was going to say. This isn't you weren't going to see Hulk Hogan suddenly jump in the mud wrestling pool because it was a paddling pool.
It could have been John Cena.
John Cena, yeah.
You weren't going to see him at the Tropicana in the mud.
Yeah,
wasn't going to happen. Or the Rock.
Yeah, the Rock.
Or the Mud, as he was known in his early days, before his career solidified. Yeah, okay. So
even in the 80s, in which notions of sexism were somewhat different, as you can probably gather by our conversation,
little bit different
were today.
Yeah.
The highlight of Tropicana, which there'd be music and there'd be all of this going on, and then all of that would stop, and out would come an MC, and I can't remember the guy's name. It was sort of like MC Mike or something like that. He had a name. The guy had a name, whatever his name was, and he would call up 2 girls in bikinis, and they would auction them off to people at some of the tables. So you could bid for your mud wrestler. So you could bid, I'll bid, $10 or whatever it was.
What, and they would join you at the table?
They would become your fighter. So you were backing that.
Gotcha. You became their sponsor.
You could auction. So how demeaning was that? I remember there was a mud wrestler called Red. I remember that. The night
of course there was.
The night that I went there.
Did she have red hair?
I purely went there as a journalist to report back on what was happening. She did have red hair, amazingly enough. and then the girls would get in this, like a paddling pool filled with fake mud. I mean, I don't know what it really was. It was, it was just fake.
I'm hoping it was mud.
Well, it wasn't mud. It wasn't the sort of off
so you're destroying a decade's worth of illusions. It was more kind of
more liquidy than
Let's
mud.
Call it mud.
Let's call it mud. And they would wrestle. They would wrestle in these little bikinis, and that was it. That was a standard night out.
And because I never actually got as far as the Tropicana. because I was leading a sheltered existence, obviously, in those days. But when you say wrestle, I mean, like...
Well, I mean, the mud's incredibly slippery, so you can't... You really get hold of each other.
I'm getting a little...
Yeah, you're getting an idea of what it's actually like.
A bit slippery.
Slippery mud, and they're kind of sliding around in their bikinis. That was the Tropicana.
And was it 3 falls, 1 submission, or a knockout?
I don't even know how they told you. But it was, and then there was something, and then they play like Round and Round or something by round and round, round and round we go, And the girls have been, and you can imagine what it was like.
Oh, is that why they used Round and Round in that movie, The Wrestler? Years later with Mickey Rourke.
Maybe it was. Or maybe it was just because it was a cool song.
Yeah. Round and round.
Round and round.
How did it go?
No,
I knew...
I knew right from the beginning that you would end up winning. I knew right from the start you'd put an arrow in my heart. Boom, round and round.
Yeah.
Round and round.
See, that's
cool
proper.
Song.
That's
how you write a song.
That's your proper.
That's how you write a song.
That's proper.
Yeah.
Where is that quality these days?
I've got a question for you, Mickey. Did you ever see a band write a song?
Did I ever see a band write a song?
Yeah.
You mean one of those bands?
Yeah. Because you'd have been in recording studios and that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean.
There when they kind of had a moment of inspiration.
Ooh, let me think. I've been in a situation where I've had people play me works in progress.
Yeah.
Famously, this is giving me a memory. I must tell you quickly.
Yeah.
Not LA, but same era. In 1985, Bruce Dickinson, the Iron Maiden singer, and I this is London, happened to live not far from each other. And he came round one day, much to my sort of, discomfort, because we all liked Bruce, but
we come round.
We were never unhappy when he left, because he was one of those guys, he wouldn't talk to you, he'd talk at you.
Yeah.
We used to joke that as he'd be talking to you at some party, he'd be waving a tenner behind his back, so someone would come and relieve you, He's a writer, he's an Olympic fencer, he's a pilot. What can't this guy do? Yeah. So he came round, and he saw I had an acoustic guitar, and he picked it up, and he's played me 3 of the songs he was then writing for the next Maiden album. And it was all kind of brung. The man came from the mountain, and the valley below.
And then he gave them to Harry, and Harry said no.
The next Iron Maiden album was Somewhere in Time, which if you look that up right now, you'll see there isn't a single songwriting credit for Bruce on there. Yeah. And do you know why? I found out later. Because Bruce had been going around loads of people's houses and playing these songs. And Steve Harris, who was like the Nicky Six of or Jimmy Page of Maiden, he went, he's what? He goes, yes, Steve, he's been playing people the new songs he's written for the album. Yeah, well, see how many fucking songs he ends up with on the album then? None.
That's the way the music business works. And when you used to see the line musical differences applied to bands breaking up.
Yeah. That was really what it was.
Yeah, that was,
very much musical. Yeah. But, okay, so I'm thinking, let's go back to LA.
Yeah,
Clearly we're not going to cover all of this in one episode.
No way.
We're not even going to scratch the surface.
No.
But going back to LA, until Guns N' Roses came along, or maybe Poison, I don't know, but I've
got to tell you, Poison. The first time I ever went to LA, I've got to tell you, I was. And this is a remarkable series of events that I didn't really appreciate at the time. The Hyatt on Sunset was where I was staying.
Also known as the Riot
House, as it was known. It's best known probably, apart from Led Zeppelin Drive, it has an underground car park from which Led Zeppelin drove their motorbikes into some sort of lift that went up to the mezzanine.
Right, where they had a swimming pool on the roof.
The other thing was, the swimming pool on the roof, which is where the scenes in Spinal Tap are filmed from the end, which is where everyone knows that sort of rooftop pool. It was an incredibly cool hotel. Very nice hotel. And I was coming down the lift, like first morning, I'm like, got me little room. In America, you go into a hotel room, and it had, even though it was a single room, it had 2 double beds in it and a massive TV. And you thought, am I sharing with someone or something? You know, massive. Come out this massive room, get in the lift stops, the doors open, and in gets Little Richard. No shit, Little Richard got in there.
Well, he was
living at the Hyatt.
He lived at the Hyatt, yeah.
Even better than that, he was going jogging. He had on a red velour tracksuit, right? And you know what Richard looks like with the big hair and everything. And around his neck, he had one of the hotel fluffy white towels. So he looked amazing. It was like, "Good morning," you know, this amazing, it was this amazing voice, you know, and the teeth and the hair, it just sensational. And I was like, and I had no idea he lived there, you know. And I was like, Jesus Christ, that's Little Richard, you know. And the lift descends and opens in the lobby, and the Hyatt had a sort of glass front that looked out onto Sunset Strip, and just over the road was that little tattoo place that everyone used to get tattooed at. And as the doors opened, pressed up against the glass doors were thousands, or it looked like thousands, I mean, it was probably a couple of hundred, girls just going nuts. And the reason is Poison were in the lobby. Right. Poison were in the hotel lobby, and they were going, who knows where, I don't know where they were going. Who knows where they were going?
They were just going out to catch some Rhodes.
And these women were going mental. And Poison just kind of standing there lapping all this up, you know. and Little Richard gets out of the lift, and you're thinking, can this get any weirder? You know. And I thought, I've got to see what's going to happen here. And Little Richard walks over to the glass fronted thing, and there was like a revolving door. Not the maitre d', who was the doorman. Doorman. Morning, Mr. Richard, or whatever it was he called it. Morning, Little, spins him off the door. And Little Richard did this jog. He went past all the guys. He did this jog, and he went down one block, which was only about, 50 yards. Turned around and came back and put his towel back on and went back in the lift. It was fantastic. Only time I've ever saw him. And I do remember what Poison were doing, because we ended up doing is they were going on tour, and they played in Long Beach that night. I think that we went and saw.
Okay.
And it was at the time, I think Bret Michaels was going out with Pamela Anderson at the time. Not bad.
Didn't we all go out with Pamela at some point? Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't, and you didn't, but
no,
everybody
else was there when someone else did.
Yeah.
So that counts.
Were Poison headlining that show?
I don't know if they were. I only ever went to Long Beach twice, to the arena. And Long Beach is, I'm talking about LA being a big place. Long Beach is really miles away. It's miles away. And it's like a really industrial part. It's a port. It's part, it's not it's not like Venice Beach. It's not where you think, I'm going to Long Beach. No, it's not amazing. Anyway. And
isn't it out near what they call Newport Beach? Which is a really long.
Yeah, that's and you get those kind of long reach, and I think Long Beach is a long beach, in fairness, but there is a port there and that sort of thing.
Right.
And to get there, you had to go through South Central.
Lovely.
That was when South Central was South Central. Let me tell you. So that was all interesting on the tour bus. But no, the other band I saw that was sadly it was Dio in one of their down swings. And it was the old, when you used to go to those arenas.
This must be the 90s.
Yeah, and they used to call it a half house or something. And what they would do is in the arena, which is obviously, oval shaped.
Right.
And usually when you're doing well, the stage is at one end.
Yeah.
But this, they would cut it in half. No joke, we played a game of football, like almost 11 aside, behind the stage. There was that much room in the afternoon. It was Dio and Anthrax and someone, I think. And it just hadn't sold at all. But Poison was like,
well, Poison definitely had their big moment. We talked about the Rainbow earlier on. I can very well remember one evening when I went in there with Slash. Again, this is slightly before he's Slash.
Yeah.
He was in my room using my room tab because he didn't actually have anywhere to live at that moment. And so I just took him round with me that night. Wherever I was going, he tagged along as my +1. And we got to the Rainbow, and Poison were in there. And there was nearly a fight because I don't know if you remember, but Slash had been in Poison.
Oh, he was yeah.
Like you were saying, how everybody was in everybody's band before
that's right.
CC DeVille.
Yeah,
the great
CC DeVille.
CC DeVille.
Yeah,
you know what the CC stood for, don't you?
No.
No, I don't know either. I just thought maybe you'd know. I always just assumed it was Cocaine Charlie.
I'm not even going to say what I was going to say.
Well, Cuddly Cutie.
Yeah.
Cuddly Cutie
CC was
DeVille.
one of the great intellects. CC.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't he like the Nicky Six of the band? Wasn't he the powerhouse behind the top level songwriting? Wasn't it CC that came up with nothing but a guitar? And it don't get better than this.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Slash was in Poison, and afterwards I said to Slash, what's wrong with, why don't you like CC? You know, and Slash said, explained he'd been in Poison. He goes for 5 minutes, but of course Slash was the Top Hat guy.
Yeah.
But Poison got super famous in '86.
Yes.
Which was, Appetite came out over a year later, but didn't become a big album for another year nearly. And in that time, CC had been in all these videos wearing a top hat.
Oh. Well,
you know what I mean?
Piss you off, wouldn't it?
Well, if you were Slash, and you're not even famous Slash.
You've not even made the top hat famous yet.
But CC has come along, and he's made the top hat famous. I mean, that was a hanging offence in West Hollywood in those days.
Yeah. CC will pay for that.
Yeah. But I tell you what, Poison get derided. But I remember that first album they did. And like most bands, they didn't come from LA. They went to LA.
Yeah.
And 3 of them had blonde hair.
Yeah.
And one of them, Bobby Dahl, he had dark hair. But also before I get to this, back to names, Bret Michaels, CC DeVille, and the drummer.
The great.
The legendary.
Mr. Ricky
Rocket.
Yeah.
Okay.
What a name.
Okay.
Ricky Rocket.
Have you met Ricky Rocket?
Yeah.
Hey, Ricky, are you Ricky Rocket? I am Ricky Rocket, actually.
Yeah.
I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, yeah, that's that first album, Look What the Cat Dragged In, I thought was a great record.
Have you seen someone's updated the cover with them as old? It's very funny.
Oh, you mean not for real?
No, the album cover, No, not for real, no. That would be great, wouldn't it? 50th anniversary edition. Here's how we look now. Here's a treat for you. What's under Brett's fucking bandana? No one ever knew, did they? What was under his bandana?
Do you know what else? You could do? I was thinking of. I was going to end this just for this episode, saying LA rock in the 80s. What would be? What would make the best of album? Say 10 tracks.
Yeah.
We don't have to name all 10 tracks, although we can try. But I was also thinking what might be even more amazing would be a worst of.
Yeah.
So what were the 10 worst tracks in LA rock?
Paul Elliott once made a worst of Iron Maiden tape that was fantastic. It was brilliant. Really funny. Yeah, we should.
So many candidates.
We should patent that. I'm sure the bands would love it.
The worst album in the world, Volume 3, LA, 1984.
And what will be on it? Well, I don't know. I mean, if you remember the film Decline and Fall of Western Civilization that Penelope Spheris made, that is terrific. Odin are in that. Odin.
Who can remember Odin?
Odin.
Like the party just never starts.
It was all because Bill Gazzari, was his name?
Ben Gazzari?
Ben or Bill?
Ben.
Ben's the famous, I think his name's Bill or Ben.
I'm pretty sure it's
someone
Ben.
Gazzari, but he's an old guy, back in the 80s.
The actor?
No, the guy he was an old guy, and he ran Gazzari's The Club.
Oh, right, maybe it was Bill. Yeah, maybe it was Bill.
And he had, this is even in the 80s, he was he was sort of in his 70s or something, and he had, grey hair, but he dressed like a rock guy, and he'd have a couple of chicks, but it wasn't convincing. And he'd go, and he used to get,
no, really?
Randy Randy was the singer in Odin.
Odin.
Okay, and
Who can remember Odin?
Well, I can remember Odin because I've talked about it so many times because they became fascinating. But Randy he looked like David Lee Roth, but the non-famous version of David Lee. So he was a big, strong guy with like long blonde hair. He looked good, you know, but he didn't look famous. I mean, Roth looked famous. Do you know what I mean when I say someone looks famous?
Oh, no, he had a lot of charisma.
Randy looked good, but he didn't look famous. But he would wear, you remember everyone used to wear those sort of leather biker chaps.
Oh, yeah.
But you'd wear...
Didn't we all wear those, John, in those days? I used to wear some with the arse out.
Yeah, well, this was Randy's thing, was everyone used to wear jeans underneath, except Randy. He used to just wear the chaps. And Bill Gazzara used to be looking at him going, that Randy, he's a foxy guy. And Odin had a song called 12 O'Clock High. And I advise you to go... You see, Randy used to go, are you ready for the 12 o'clock high? It was my favourite LA song. And he used to go, 12 o'clock high, in the way those voices used to go to Spire. If you couldn't really sing, you used to get over it by, doing...
Screeching.
Doing the screeching. So 12 o'clock high is my nomination. I don't know what yours is.
Okay, what, for worst song?
Worst song.
Oh, my God, so many.
Although we say there are some great LA songs as well, which I think we used to talk about quite often. I mean, Under the Bridge is a great LA song.
Yeah. I think when it comes to that LA metal era we're talking about, though, I think greatest song and worst song, there's a lot of overlap.
There's a
lot of overlap.
One man's greatest is another man's...
I mean,
Shine,
Round and Round by Rat.
Round and Round's a great... I could say that a great, terrible song.
Well, at the time, I remember thinking, isn't this a bit kind of cheesy and obvious?
Yeah.
But as the years went by, I mean, I remember when it came up in that movie, The Wrestler.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's heartbreaking.
Fantastic record.
It's heartbreaking. You know that guy Ryan Adams, not Brian Adams, Ryan Adams.
No, Ryan,
yeah. He does a cover, like a little acoustic cover of it. And you think, no, actually, it's a great tune.
Do you know what else Ryan Adams does?
He does Wasted Years.
He does.
Amazingly well.
Amazingly well, because it is an amazing song.
Yeah.
Which Adrian Smith wrote on his own on the Somewhere in Time album, which featured no Bruce Dickinson songs whatsoever.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Oh dear. No, well, John, I think we're gonna wrap this one up.
That's a wrap.
But we are going to return to Los Angeles.
Let's hope so. Often.
We are going to return to the 80s in our never-ending mission to go where pretty much every man has been before. as the Bishop said to the actress in Los Angeles in about 1984.
Get your rocks off. That's exactly what she said to him.
All right, John, thank you, and later.
Yeah, laters, dude.
If you liked this episode, be sure to leave us a review, share it with a friend, or plain old subscribe wherever you happen to listen to it. For full episode show notes, visit nofilter.media/Getcha Rocks Off.